Who do you have coming out the West?
I would be honest, man. It's game time, man. Check your watch. It's
What?
man.
I mean, and coming off the bench isn't a bad thing.
It's going to be hard for them to replace Russ.
You are tuned into Hot Take Season,
2-3 years of
where these hot takes are rated E for everyone.
a rotational quarterback. Like, that's going to be a while. I think they'll go to the
Hot Take Season. Hot Take Season. Hot Take Season.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Hot Take Season. I'm your host, Mia Me. Joining me as a co-host for this episode is a good friend of mine, Mr. Tony Monk of Spot On Sports. How are you, Tony?
All good, all good. Representing the new wave of sports that is sweeping the nation, where we're not just accurate, but we are spot on. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing this. So Tony, for our special guest for this episode is somebody I've been a fan of for a good while. He's always provided me with some good insight on our beloved Dallas Cowboys. Mr. Bryan Broaddus of 105.3 The Fan. How are you, sir?
Excellent, guys. So good, nice to be with you. Post draft, this is the first media stuff that I've done post draft. So it's nice to kind of sit down, take a break, and kind of reflect on where this thing went.
Nice. So if you could you give us a little background on your career with the NFL?
Yeah, I was a scout for 13 years in the NFL. Started with the Green Bay Packers in 1992. Won a Super Bowl with them in 1996. Went on to the Philadelphia Eagles. Ran the 1998 draft for them, and the draft gods smiled on me that day. We had 4 of our 6 picks made the Pro Bowl 3 years later. So only opportunity I ever had to do that, and then I got involved with afterwards. After I got out of scouting, my son was born, Bennett, who just celebrated his 17th birthday. So it's kind of funny how he was born during the 04 draft. And it got me to where I was time to go, get off the road, do some things, get out of scouting, get into the media side of things. So here I am. I've had just as long a scouting career as I've had a media career. So I've been very blessed to have those 2 types of careers.
Nice. Happy birthday to Bennett.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if I could ask, what would you say, or who would you say was maybe one of your favorite prospects that you scouted for either team?
Wow, that's we so many years that we've done things, throughout being part of with drafts and stuff like that. And I was one particular guy I'm the most proud of. But it's going to be, here we are talking about the Cowboys and things like that. I'm sure when I was in Philadelphia and running that draft, we had a player named Jeremiah Trotter. He's from Texas. He went to school at Stephen F. Austin here in Texas. And I just remember a doctor telling me, and this is the kind of information you get during a draft. I had a doctor say, hey, he's got a terrible knee. I mean, he's got a bad knee. And I just remember thinking, man, I love this kid. I want him to play on my team so bad. And the doctor said, listen, Brian, I don't know if he's going to play 10 years or 10 games. And to Jeff Lurie's credit, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, he looked at me, he said, Brian, if you think this passionately about that player, let's take him. And we did. We drafted him in the 3rd round. Jeremiah ended up playing 13 years in NFL. He was a Pro Bowl player. He was a thorn in the Dallas Cowboys side at a couple of places, Philadelphia, Washington. But I'm really, really proud of him because it was one of those times where I was so happy about evaluating a player. And then I was so sad that maybe I'm just going to have to pass because of the knee. And then, but to the credit of the owner of the Eagles there, Jeff Lurie, he saw what I saw in the player. He felt what I felt about the player. And he said, go for it. Do it. Let's do this. And I can't thank him enough. Every time I see Jeff Lurie, whether it's at the Senior Bowl or a league meeting or whatever, I go up and I almost give him a hug to thank him for Jeremiah Trotter and what he was allowing me to do that day.
What's the hardest part about being a scout, Brian? Where do you find that there's that bump in the road or that difficulty when you're scouting players?
Yeah, it's a great job if you're young and single. But if you got a family, it's a little rough. Scouts are on the road, but it's really funny because of what we have with the pandemic. The scouts didn't get to go out like they normally do, and so they were all sitting at home. But as a scout, you're gone about 200 days a year. You're living in hotels, you're driving to schools, you're going to various, you're talking to people, you're bouncing from place to place. I think the part about it is really there's a loneliness to it because you're out there by yourself so much, but you're around other scouts at times, but it's not your family. That's the one thing. But I'll tell you something, guys. Some of these families have gotten used to dad being out on the road. They're like, and I'm sure when all these scouts were sitting at home watching tape, there were some wives and kids who were going, "Dad, aren't you supposed to be out on the road?" They get used to a lifestyle where dad is gone, and those are the families that they really really stick together because they know their dad's out there doing something he loves, but he's also doing it for the love of the benefit of the family, and that's really the hardest part about it, and especially this year, though, the scouts really miss being out there on the road. It's something you always get used to doing.
Would you say it's hard? I think COVID did make it a lot harder to go out and scout. But how would you say that the Cowboys scouts did in regards to this draft?
I think that when you look at how it was put together, and we're all learning about this Zoom stuff. I mean, I do radio every day on 105.3, and there was a whole year where we were doing radio like this. I was in the studio. The guys I was with were at home. We were all separated, and it's tough because as a scout in a scouting department, you want that interaction, the 30 visits, Dallas Day, all those things that bring the players to you, the combine, all those, it just wasn't the same. And I think that most teams have figured out how to do the Zoom stuff. It's not the most ideal way. I mean, we're doing it right now because it's a way of putting this together. But for teams, it's hard. It really is because you want that interaction. And I think they did a good job with the players that they got. There was a couple of guys there that I felt like, on my personal board, and guys, as you know, they don't care about what I think. They nobody cares it's what they want to do. So when I'm talking about, hey, that's a great pick, or that's a great pick, or that pick stinks, I have guys call me up and like, hey, that's fine, Brian, you could say that and you could say this and that. And it's cool, man. I'm okay with that because, again, we all see these players differently. But for them to do it in this pandemic era, the way we are with all the interactions and stuff, or the lack of interaction that they have with players, I think they pulled off a pretty good draft.
And so, Brian, to kind of get more into that draft, obviously we can say that the picks that they probably did and didn't get right. And the big elephant in the room is Nashawn Wright, who they got from Oregon State. When we look at these draft boards and we see, well, the Cowboys bring Dan Quinn in as a defense coordinator. He's the guy that likes to range cornerbacks. Is this a guy where you say, well, hey, maybe they took a chance, or maybe he was highly regarded on their draft board and he could be the guy for them standing at 6'4"?
Yeah, and it's a really good question because I just got done watching tape. I evaluated 190 players myself, and that's something. I mean, now that I do full-time radio, it's gotten a lot harder for me to do that, but I have to do it for my job. And in sitting down and evaluating Wright, it's really unusual to see a cornerback that is 6'4", and the way you move. And traditionally, cornerbacks that are that tall have a problem with what scouts call being leggy. And I mean leggy when you're too tall and you can't, it doesn't look quick when you turn, when you backpedal and then you turn and you adjust. It doesn't look right because it seems like it takes them. And we're getting into an era now, and this is where the Cowboys, I hope they're back into this. And with Dan Quinn, I think Dan Quinn will do a fine job. I have buddies in Atlanta that absolutely swear by him. But this is where I wonder, because we are going to a smaller wide receiver in the league. We're going to a smaller, quicker, look what Kansas City's done, with Hill and guys like that. if you're a tall guy and you're having to adjust to a 6 foot or shorter receiver that is shifty and mobile and in and out of breaks, and you're tall and long and having to turn, that could be a trouble. That could be a lot of trouble. And, I think with Wright, the more I watch him play at Oregon State, he's going to have to play up on those guys. I mean, Dan Quinn is going to have to walk him up on those receivers, and he's going to have to get his hands on people, because there's some tape I watched today where he was playing the University of Washington and he was playing off coverage, and that means back away, and the receiver runs at him and then makes that move, and he has to try and adjust, and he has to engage. He's down the field, he has to engage, and he rides the corner, the receiver out. Well, he gets called for the contact or pass interference, and those are the things, like, I'm thinking, well, gosh, don't play him that far off, and play him up on the line of scrimmage. So I do worry a little bit. Dallas committed to drafting tall cornerbacks. That's something that they did, and they're going to have, that's what they want to do. But I just hope they're not behind the game here when it comes to that. Everybody else seems to be playing with 5'11", 6 foot wide receivers. You need to match that speed and quickness with their own speed and quickness, and we'll see if they did the right thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. They did pretty much draft a lot of long players. I
Yeah.
think some have the speed that they'll need, but you make a good point with talking about how they're going to have to be able to turn and adjust and things
Right.
like that. Are there any that you think may have the most upside of the DBs that they did draft?
Yeah, you know what? I do. To me, I think where this draft is going to hinge, I don't think there's anything wrong with Wright, other than the fact that I hope they have the right plan for him, and I think with the kid that they took from South Carolina, later in the draft, I kind of feel like that's going to be play him at safety than it is play him at corner. I think the one guy that's going to play the corner will be Wright, and we'll see on the other half, with the move probably to safety. But I think this draft, guys, is going to hinge on really a couple of spots. They obviously, Micah Parsons, I feel like, is initially going to be the guy they use as a pass rusher. That was what his strength was coming out of Penn State. The coverage aspect wasn't as strong for him. So anything they could do with him attacking the pocket, I think initially is going to be the way. And then they're going to say, okay, how do we incorporate more things with him, like for Jalen Smith? We've seen Jalen Smith, when you follow the Cowboys, he rushes the passer, he attacks the pocket. When they put him in coverage, he gets exposed more that way. So to me, I feel like, though, Parsons was going to take over that role of rushing the passer. Now, on the flip side of that, when they drafted Jabril Cox is a better cover guy. So what you'll see from him is, okay, let's take Parsons and rush him. Let's put Cox in coverage and let him carry guys. So you may see, this might be a future where all of a sudden you see, not this season, but in 2022, where it's Parsons and Jabril Cox as the starters, and then see what you have with Leighton Vander Esch. We'll see about them picking up that fifth-year option. That's guaranteed money. That's $9.1 million guaranteed right there. They have to maybe make a decision on Jalen Smith. Do they want to continue to play him? So we might be seeing the new linebackers coming in, or how the Cowboys are going to want to play. But they've made it known as, like, okay, we've got a rusher and we've got a cover, and that's kind of where I think that's going to go. I do like what they've also done, added with the guys like Chauncey Golston, Odighizuwa. I mean, these guys are like, I think Odighizuwa is going to play as that under tackle or that 3 technique. He's a guy that is, when he plays on that outside shoulder, he gets up the field. I think that, I don't know how well that's going to bode for, let's see what happens with Gallimore. Let's see what happens with Tristan Hill. Last year we kind of saw some positivity from those guys, but Odighizuwa will come in and he will be an upfield player, and he will be a really good upfield player for them. So he might take that 3 technique role. And then, of course, you got Quentin Bohanna, who they drafted, who is a massive man, 327-pound guy. So I'm not so much focusing on Wright as the corner piece. I'm kind of focusing on the other guys in the front 7 because, like I say, Bohanna is totally different from anything that they've ever had at that what we call the nose or that 1 technique. So if you get Bohanna playing that 1 or the nose, you say you get Odighizuwa playing the 3, or you get Gallimore or Hill, I think you're a little bit better suited right there. So I like what they've done with the defensive guys there. I felt like that they took Odighizuwa, Golston a little bit maybe a round early, but that's okay. They do have a role. Golston is a lot like what we see with DeMarcus Lawrence, where he's okay pass rusher. I'm saying Lawrence is a good pass rusher, but a good run defender. Golston's got the first step to rush the passer, but he is a really good run defender. So there might be some interchangeable pieces that these guys are going to have here on this defense.
Quick question before we move on to our next thing. I do want to speak on the linebackers. Obviously, drafting Micah Parsons and then you go and get Jabril Cox, and then that just sounds the alarm like, oh, what does that mean for Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch?
Right.
Where do you see the Cowboys as far as what they're going to do with those 2 linebackers? Obviously, we project them to be the starters once again coming into the 2021 season. But as far as you yourself, Brian, has your ship sailed on those 2 linebackers? Are you ready to move on to Parsons and Cox?
Yeah, I think where you have to look at the thing with Parsons and Cox, it makes again, it's that the interchangeable, the blitzer, the rusher, the cover guy. And so, they've obviously determined the biggest problem with Leighton Vander Esch is his health. And that's the thing that's scary when you're going into a season. It's very similar to what Sean Lee was. It was very similar to what Tyron Smith is. These are guys that every year they're in the best shape of their life. Then we start to practice and we start to play games, and things happen to them. And I think they're to the point now with when we look at that the Cowboys are trying to protect themselves, on that. I was thinking that the Cowboys, when they had a chance to pick Slater, the guard tackle from Northwestern, I'm like, okay, hit him there at 10 and then come back at 44 and get the kid Bolton from Missouri, a linebacker that can run and make all these plays. And, Dan Quinn playing with a smaller linebacker, that kind of stuff. And it would have worked out that way, but they did this the other way. And to really answer your question, I do feel like that they're saying, listen, if these young kids come in and give us something better or better health, I feel like you will see a little bit of a transition there. And like I say, with Parsons, I think it's going to be a little bit slower. I don't think they're going to throw everything at him. I think they're going to say, go rush the passer. We'll take Jalen Smith off the field. And then it'll turn into, okay, Jalen Smith, you're going to play the Sam linebacker. And, or they might, like I say, Dan Quinn saying, hey, our base defense is a 3-4. 3 down linemen, get Jalen on the field, get Parsons on the field, get Cox on the field, get Vander Esch on the field. That's very much something that we could see in a base front. But when they rush the passer, they'll go 4-man line, and that's where you'll see guys like Parsons come in and be a part of that.
Yes.
A lot of new defensive signings, 2 from Atlanta with Dan Quinn. Any thoughts on that? How that may look?
Yeah, I think that with Dan, and I was talking to my buddies in Atlanta about that, and with Keanu Neal, they talk about him, that ability to play down in the box in the nickel packages, to take on the run, be able to handle the pass underneath. I think that's where really that he could shine in this, much like if you remember back in the day, what like Barry Church used to do.
Yeah.
When Barry Church used to play down, that's Church was his most effective. When routes were crossing, Barry would be able to be physical, take that on. The ball would run at him. Barry could take that on. I could see where Keanu Neal has that type of presence. I was kind of feeling like that the Cowboys were going to draft a safety, a true free safety, but we'll see what happens with Kazee. Not a huge contract, but he's a guy that is super smart. The Achilles, let's see if we can come back from that. That'll be a little bit difficult transition, but he is really a true free safety, and they've got to figure out something too, like to how to help if they're going to play with Donovan Wilson, because Donovan Wilson is kind of a down player too. They need to get a guy back on the back end that can be more of a true free. So when they go what they call that single high cover 3, they'll have somebody down and somebody that can play with range that can help on the back. So Kazee will be the free, and I think Keanu Neal will be the guy that plays down and tries to be physical in that regard.
So we have a fan question.
Sure.
So you kind of answered this earlier about Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch kind of being on the hot seat, so to say, with this. What does this also maybe mean for DeMarcus Lawrence?
Well, I think this is more, to me, it's Lawrence is one of those guys. I know fans get really upset watching Tank play, and but the more, if you could get, and I always recommend this to fans, you don't have to be a scout to do this. You could get, like, you watch the games, but the NFL is a package with with their all 22, their Game Pass stuff. You could sit down and, like, for $100, you get all the Cowboys season. I know that's $100 is $100. I get it, but you get all the game and you get all the tape of the game. You get the coach's film, they call it, the sideline view and the end zone copy, and you can watch Lawrence play. And when you watch Lawrence play, you'll say, "Oh, I see what they're doing here. Oh, I get it." Again, you don't need to be a scout, but you can watch him with the pressures. You can watch him play the run. I don't think they're going to do anything with Lawrence. I'm one of those guys that every time I watch him play, I'm kind of like, if I was grading him and how they grade him on a weekly basis, it's plus, 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 maybe a minus, plus. I mean, I see more pluses with his game than I do minuses. So I just don't see anything. Now, will it be more of a rotation? We'll see. This is the first time that they'll have, Randy Gregory for a full off season, full OTAs, full all that. Him, Dorrance Armstrong. Now they've got Golston here. They've got some other guys that they could kind of plug in if they want to give him. Golston would be a little bit more, like I said earlier, like him, so they could take him out, give him a little bit of a rest. But I just don't think they're going to do anything with Lawrence. I think they're just going to let him continue to play, and hopefully Dan Quinn could get a little bit more out of him than, say, the previous regime had.
Bryan, let's take a look at the overall aspect of the Cowboys draft. How do you grade it, and how do you see their draft in terms if you stack it up against the Eagles and Washington and the Giants?
Yeah, I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I thought the Philadelphia Eagles had the best draft of all the teams in the NFC East, and and a lot of it has to do. And again, this is just my own. This is Bryan Broaddus looking at 190 players, and when you go with Devonta Smith, he's a weapon. And I'm an old scout, and I think people remember this name of Marvin Harrison that used to play with the Colts with Peyton Manning and Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, those guys. Devonta Smith he's Marvin Harrison to me. Slight build guy, great route runner, go get the football. Landon Dickinson, the guy they took to play guard or center at Alabama. They took him at 37. I think he's an outstanding player. Can play either one of those spots. He's big. He's physical. Zach McPherson, they took, in day 3. He's a cornerback from Texas Tech, transferred from Penn State. I really like his game a lot. You talk about getting on somebody and press, staying with them, running with them, playing the ball. Kenneth Gainwell, the running back. Philadelphia's always had some type of running back that you could throw the ball to. And now the next thing you know, we all remember Westbrook and people like that. So Gainwell's the same way. I just feel like that they did a pretty good job. And with the last pick their last pick at pick 234, they grabbed one of my favorite players in that round was Patrick Johnson from Tulane, who is a defensive end, outside linebacker, rush up the field kind of guy, can be disruptive. So if you look at overall, I felt like that their draft from their first pick to their last pick, that's a team that was talent poor in some areas. I think they addressed everything that they needed to address. I do like a little bit what the football team did too, with a couple players. Jamin Davis from Kentucky. People were sending me mock drafts. They kept sending me these mock drafts on Twitter, and every time it was Jamin Davis at 44 for the Cowboys. 40. I'm like, guys, he's not going to be there. He went at 19th overall. I knew this was going to happen. So him. Sam Cosmi from Texas at tackle. They didn't have a left tackle. They addressed that. Benjamin St. Just, who they drafted, the cornerback. I mocked him to the Dallas Cowboys as a possibility of grabbing another corner. And De'Ami Brown from North Carolina, a wide receiver. Man, they got him at pick 82. I had him a much higher player than that. So, I felt like the football team helped themselves, and everybody's talking really about what the Giants did with trading back and stuff like that. I love Tony, the wide receiver. That's a tough cover. Ojulari, I talked to my guys at the Giants. Ojulari was a guy that they talked about even drafting there at 12, 11 or 12. So, and then Aaron Robinson, the cornerback from Central Florida, I think it was a really, really good pick for them. So I feel like everybody helped themselves. Cowboys helped themselves too. We kind of went through some of those guys. But I feel like that the Eagles probably helped themselves the most. I would then say the football team, and then the Giants would be the rounding out the group behind the Cowboys on that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. We look at this entire draft and see that Mike and Dan Quinn's hands was all over it.
Right.
And we finally see that he gets this complete season. When I think we look back to last year, and I thought people were pretty hard on him in a COVID season that we, for a moment, thought was not going to happen. And we look at him having to just speaking to players probably a month before training camp actually kicks off. You're trying to install a defense via Zoom, and we know the complications that come with that. Where is this team headed now that Mike McCarthy has a full year on this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm in the business sometimes of not being fair. And I want to give the Cowboys an A+ for how they handled the pandemic to prevent their team from getting sick. I want to give the way the star out there, the facility, the space they had, the trainers, the doctors, the support staff, A+. Great job of not allowing your team to get sick and have major problems. I give them an F, though, for handling the players in the way of training them. They didn't have a good plan about the Zoom calls. They didn't have a good plan on how to teach the players. Jane Slater from the NFL Network came out with a story later in the year, and everybody was up in arms about that we're not learning, we're not doing this, we're not prepared, The more I talked to people, the more her story carried water and was absolutely right. There were players that said, hey, listen, now, is it on us, the players? Yeah. Is it on the coaches? Yeah. We saw what happened at the end of the year. What they do? They fired 3 coaches at the end, 3 defensive coaches. The pandemic plan for teaching the players was really, really poor. And that put them way behind, because all of a sudden, by the time they were playing better defensively, and they were getting some turnovers, and they weren't fumbling the ball and stuff like that themselves, but by the time they were playing better, it was too late. So I see that, to me, if anything that Mike McCarthy needs to learn from is like what we did last year to teach his players. And maybe this team, and I'm just saying this, maybe this team was not smart enough to learn on Zoom. Maybe they need to be on the field. Maybe they need OTAs. Hopefully we'll have all that. But last year, there were some teams that handled this really, really well. There's some teams that didn't play or didn't have practice or anything for 3 days, went out and played a game and found a way to win. That's handling the plan. That's having a plan. And that's your players buying into what you're doing and stuff. So I think that this year, if they had the OTAs, if they had the mini camps, if they had the real training camp where we go to Oxnard and they could really compete like we've seen before, then you'll see some improvement there. Because you got to improve because of the health of the team. You think if just the health of the team would be better, that the overall picture of the team would be better, but there's still some questions there. With Tyron Smith and Leighton Vanderson, we've gone through that really already.
Yeah, switching kind of to offense. There was a situation where they didn't know if Kellen was going to come back or not. Now that he is back, do you see the offense going in a more positive direction? They got Dak Prescott back on his contract and things like that. But it seems like they're still needing some help on the offensive line.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's why I thought that they were going to draft Rashawn Slater from Northwestern because I felt like, but the linebacker, I totally get it. I'm not killing the pick. I just felt like though when this team has drafted plug and play offensive linemen, they've done a great job. Whether it's Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, when they've done that, they've worked. It's worked out pretty well for them. So I feel like though they still have got some questions there. We need to see what's going on with Connor Williams at left guard, and maybe Connor McGovern comes in and he could take that job away, and then all of a sudden it's now Connor Williams becomes the backup tackle, swing tackle. They went out and they signed a veteran player for that, to be the swing. I don't know if that necessarily is the best. And Siki is the guy that they signed. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go, but I kind of feel like though that if they can maintain the health of that offensive line, then you start to see, because Ezekiel Elliott struggled last year, and I don't know if it was all about Ezekiel Elliott more than it was about what was going on in front of them. They just could not get any push. They could not create any holes. They just couldn't get guys up to the second level and block. So Elliott's getting hit at the line of scrimmage, a yard beyond the line of scrimmage, and it really wasn't working out all that well for him. So a lot of it's going to be about the health of that group. And if the health of the offensive line is there, then I think you'll see these wide receivers flourish. You get Blake Jarwin back. That's going to help. Dalton Schultz really developed. It's, in my case, it's about time that he developed. I mean, he got mad at me on Twitter because I was throwing dirt on him, and then he goes out and has a great year. So good for him. That's what you got to do. If you got to go out and shut people up like me, go out and have a great year, have a nice season. So I think Kellen again is a play caller, is developing, just needs to develop some more stuff though down there in the red zone, get a little bit more creative. Don't just hand the ball to Elliott and think it's going to work. You need to find a way to get CD involved, the tight ends involved, Cooper involved. All those things need to play a factor in how the offense is going to work.
Joe Looney, I know he's still a free agent right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's kind of come to an end with Joe right now?
Yeah, I would say it might be one of those things where we get into training camp and they look around and they're like, Tyler Broaddus really not getting it done. We're really not, we're not where we need to be at center. I think Joe is one of those guys who will, now Joe's a fun-loving guy. I mean, Joe's Joe came into camp that one year when Travis Frederick went down with the illness. Joe Looney was ready to play, and so Joe Looney will always be ready to play. But this might be one of those things where they get to training camp or they get into OTAs and they're saying, listen, the center's position, we just don't feel like it's a good situation right now. And then they go out and try and sign Joe Looney that way. That's kind of how I think Joe will get back here.
I gotta ask a question because I know you mentioned earlier about Ezekiel Elliott, and Bryan. I have a saying that I always do with me. You knows exactly what it is. I always say the Cowboys can do all things through Ezekiel Elliott that strengthens them, and I still believe that. And I know you spoke on the line, and the questions were, was it Zeke or was it the offensive line? And I think we can look at the Cowboys O-line and say if every other week we're putting in Steele or McKnight, and then Zach's here and then he's not. And then the center's here and he's not. And I know it's hard to establish continuity there. And then a lot of people can look and say, well, Zeke's probably on the hot seat after the Cowboys gave him $90 million. Where do you see Ezekiel Elliott right now? And do you feel as if he's regressing, or was it more of just on that line play?
I think a lot of it was on the line play itself. I really, really do. I feel like that. Elliott, and I work with two guys on 105.3 here in Dallas that absolutely hate running backs. They hate running backs. They don't. I mean, you start talking about drafting running backs and paying running backs and all that. my guys Jeff Kavanaugh and Gavin Dawson lose.
I was
their
just about to
minds.
say that.
They lose their minds about these guys. And I can understand that. I'm the old crusty guy. I'm the old crusty scout that believes you have to hand the ball off, you have to run. I watched the Cowboys when I was in Green Bay. That the Cowboys would get a 14-point lead on us, and they'd hand the ball to Emmitt Smith 20-something times in a row, and then they would just run out the game. I do feel like, though, my thoughts are going around a little bit more now about throwing the ball, being able to get the ball down the field, get those points. I will be interested to see if the line comes back healthy, that if Elliott can have more production, a more productive year. I want to believe that because there was a time his first year in 2016 where he was able to make people avoid, make people miss, had a little better burst to get through. I've been seeing some video clips on Twitter. I think we all have, where he's working on his quickness. He's working on that shiftiness again. When he came out of Ohio State, he was able to do that. He was able to go up, spin, avoid. We didn't see that from him last year. But then again, there were a lot of times where teams were like, okay, hey, we're going to stack. We're going to make Andy Dalton going to beat us. We're going to make Ben DiNucci beat us. We're going to make, whoever's playing quarterback that day beat us. It's a little bit different when you have, say, Dak Prescott playing quarterback. So I'm keeping an eye on a healthier line, maybe a little bit better in shape Zeke, and seeing if that is a recipe for better play. If not, then you can mark this up as one of those, why did the Cowboys spend all this money on a running back? They should have never extended the guy. I think you have to give it this season. And then if it happens that way, Gavin, Jeff, I owe you an apology on air. I probably will do it that day.
Gotcha. Tony, you have anything else before we wrap this up?
Yeah, the last thing that I think we need to hit on, obviously, Dak Prescott, our new $160 million guy. When a guy foot goes left, when he's trying to go right, it's not always the greatest thing. But, here he is, and I think Jerry and them have a newfound faith in their quarterback, or at least we hope that is the case. What will be the story of Dak Prescott this year? Do we see him coming back and be that guy that was throwing for nearly 400 yards a game? Albeit we were a little behind, but still been able to come out and have poised quarterback play. Will Dak Prescott still be able to come in and do those things?
Yeah, I have a really good relationship with the training staff here at the Cowboys, and everything they've talked about with Dak, and the great thing about Dak is he will always work. He'll outwork people. He'll do everything he has to do to make himself ready. And the guy who's on the rehab with him is a guy named Britt Brown, who's the associate athletic trainer. And Britt is just as driven as Dak. And when we started talking about a second surgery and things like that, I kind of felt like that maybe that Britt and Dak probably took something a little too far, and they had to go back in and kind of take care of some things. But we'll see. But yeah, they're gonna work. Those two are gonna work so hard to get back. He's gonna be ready to go. I think you have to be excited if you're a Cowboy fan. I'll tell you something that was actually pretty encouraging to me, because I was arguing the point that if you did move on from Dak, say you couldn't get the contract done, right? Man, Justin Fields was there at 10 for them to pick. And I love Justin Fields. He's my second best quarterback on the board. And I had to smile at myself. I was smiling during the draft because I'm thinking it got to Dallas's pick, and I go, damn, Justin Fields on the board here right now. And I'm thinking, if Dak Prescott had not signed that extension and this thing was going to carry, if this thing was going to carry into next season, where he didn't have a contract done, I'm telling you what, guys, I ain't going to lie to you. I would have been banging on that table to hand that Justin Fields card in. The fact they got Dak done, I think that's a great thing for the Cowboys. Dak is always going to do whatever he has to do to get himself ready, like I said. And I expect nothing but a very positive season for him. Hopefully the health will be able to maintain.
Nice. So we're going to leave this off with a hot take, hopefully from you, Bryan. Do you think the Cowboys have a better season or worse season than they did last season?
Yeah, I think they have a better season. And, it's easy to say, hey, we're going up from 6-10. But, Now you got one more game, so find a way to make this thing 11-6 or whatever you want to make it. But I'll tell you this though, I think the health of the team will be better. I do like the fact that they've added Dan Quinn. I love the fact the defensive line coach, the new secondary coach. I think the defense will be better. If anything, they'll be in better shape throughout to make plays. Dan will put these guys in position to make plays. They've got it's like I say, you're in a division right now where I think the football team is, got better. We'll see what happens with Ryan Fitzpatrick playing quarterback for the football team. But that's somebody defensively you're going to have to deal with. We'll see with the Giants. The Eagles, like I said earlier, look like they improved their team, at least through the draft. So the division could once again be up for grabs. But I do feel like that if the team can maintain health, at those key spots, the offensive tackle spot, the quarterback, I think overall they'll get better on defense. I'm not saying they'll be a top 10 defense, but they don't need to be 31st. If they could be 16th or 17th, you're gonna get 3 or 4 more wins if you could just get the defense, the scoring defense, to be in that top 15.
Do they make the playoffs, Bryan?
You know what? I think they find a way to win this division. I do. So if you win the division, you get in the playoffs. We'll see. Like I say, I worry. I tell you what, there's a lot of good teams out west. We were talking about this on our show the other day. Who do you really like in the NFC? I think they're the Rams, the Seahawks, probably the 49ers. The 49ers are the same shape as the Cowboys, really, with the health of their team. I think those guys are better. But I don't know about Arizona. I'll have to wait and see. I don't think Arizona, even though Arizona beat them last year. But I will say this, though. Those 3 teams, the 2 Bay teams, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, what's going to happen in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers? If they pull Aaron Rodgers out of there, that makes Green Bay for the taking right there. So there's probably 6 teams better than Dallas. So if they could get in the tournament, maybe they find a way that they become better than those teams I was talking about out west, or either one of the Bay teams. They do play Tampa Bay. I think they played both teams this year. I think they played both Green Bay and Tampa Bay. I think I'm right about that. So we'll see as the schedule comes out here in about 2 weeks.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you, Tony, for joining in with me. This has been another episode of Hot Take Season. Y'all be blessed out there.